The labor market is tight and small business owners are short-staffed. To lure talent their way, they have to offer more than a competitive salary and a generous sign-on bonus. That's where the 401k plan comes into play. This tax-advantaged retirement savings vehicle has become almost an expectation for employees across America. But can small business owners afford it? I'm Donna Fuscaldo. I'm a senior finance writer with business.com. Today, we're speaking with Daniel Beck. He's CEO and co-founder of 401go. He's here to discuss the costs associated with the 401k plan, how a small business owner can figure out what they can afford, and what could go wrong if you don't offer it. Hey, Dan, thanks so much for taking out the time today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So, labor market's tight. Small business owners are having a hard time finding staff. They have to offer more than a bonus and a competitive salary, and that's where the 401k plan comes in.
Yep.
Is this something that small business owners can actually afford, or is this a cost not worth it?
It's certainly become much more affordable in the recent, 5 or so years. And so now companies, as small as one, just a couple employees can set up a 401k and really, compete with larger corporations and organizations where they're trying to, have that same level of talent.
What happens if they don't offer it? If they're just like, you know what, I can't afford this. I can barely make my budget every month. Forget it. I'm not doing it.
It's a challenge, and it's really hard to, I think it depends on a case-by-case basis, but oftentimes, especially if an employer is struggling with high turnover, the cost to not offer it can actually be a lot more than the cost to offer it. So getting a new employee up to speed, going out and having to hire employees all the time, you lose a lot of knowledge every time you lose an employee and you have to train a new one. So lost productivity, recruitment costs. There's a lot of reasons where it can actually be much more expensive to not offer a 401k.
When it comes to 401k plans, is there different price ranges? Can you offer some things and not other things? Like, how do you go about figuring out what you can afford?
What it comes down to is before a 401k, there are SEP and simple IRAs. So these are alternative solutions that have been created to kind of help bridge that gap. But really, there's enough alternatives out there where, if you're looking at like a fintech solution, there's no reason you can't start with a 401k right away. And so really at that point, the discussion more is centered around, should we do a match or should we not do a match? So a lot of times companies assume that a 401k means they have to match what an employee is putting in, but that's not true. And so if it's something where they know they want to have that benefit, but maybe they can't afford to do a match right away, they can still set up a 401k and it can be extremely affordable, a few bucks per employee per month. And then, at some future point when the company's, doing better or is more profitable, or they find that this benefit's in high demand, they can certainly do a match at that point.
So the biggest cost associated with the 401k is the match. And Certainly. It seems like the match is what's luring the talent there. So yeah. How do you figure out how much you can afford to match if that's going to get the talent?
Yeah, so really in small business environments, typically the most beneficial type of plan is what's called a safe harbor plan. And really what that means is that small businesses sometimes have a hard time meeting all of the different testing and the compliance requirements, because a lot of times 401ks are, again, they're typically offered by larger organizations. And so small businesses can still have some protection by setting up a safe harbor. With those safe harbor plans, there are different matching formulas. The one that we see, as most beneficial, so being affordable as well as delivering really good outcomes for employees, is what we call a QACA or a QACA with a safe harbor match. And the reason that we like that one is because it encourages employees to participate a significant amount in order to maximize the employer contribution. And so in that scenario, the employer would match up to 3.5% if the employee themselves are putting away 6% of their earnings towards a 401k. So that's the one that we find actually to be quite affordable for employees. Or for employers, also very beneficial for employees because it offers them a generous match and it encourages them to participate, so the employer's not just giving them money.
When you're studying 401k plans, how do you choose one that your employees are even going to want to use? Is this a long process?
It really shouldn't be, and it's certainly gotten a lot easier for small businesses. It used to be that, in setting up a 401k, there were some 50 to 60 different questions and things that the employer had to review to really understand what goes into a 401k. But of all those questions, there's really only about 4 or 5 that employers really need to worry about. And everything else is largely tied to the administration aspects of a 401k. And so if you're finding, one of these newer solutions that's more, tech oriented, that automates a lot of those things, then all of that administrative, burden and the questions that are associated with it can be disregarded. And so it makes it a lot easier for an employer to set things up without having to worry about some of these complicated things that they may have, had to concern themselves with 10 years ago. So that's the big thing, and really finding somebody that can guide you through that process is beneficial. And most of the kind of the tech platforms, they have somebody you can call in and talk to as you're being guided through that process. But it's certainly important when you set up the 401k to try to get it, as correct the first time as possible, because changing it can be a little bit more cumbersome than other types of benefits. There's certainly notification requirements and everything else that your 401k provider should help you with. But the goal is obviously to get it right from the start.
Great. So in terms of the cost, what's an average, say a small business with, I don't know, 100 employees, how much is without a match, how much will it cost them per month per employee? And then if you add the match, how much more does it go up?
So really for a larger organization, so 100, a lot of the businesses that we help actually are more in like the 20, 25 employee range. At 100, there's, you have quite a few options, and your costs typically break down into, there's the administrative costs that are borne by the employer. And so those are oftentimes a monthly fee, annual fees. And typically there's multiple service providers involved. And so you're not always necessarily paying just one firm or one, individual. It's usually you're paying a record keeper, a third-party administrator, a custodian. And so, with most of those, there's really two components. There's the administrative cost that the employer is paying. And then there's also an asset fee that is taken out of plan assets, and plan assets are the employees. And so it's essentially a fee that the employees are paying for the 401k. And it's quite shocking. Most employees don't, realize, most people who have 401ks don't realize there's actually some fees associated with it. So as a whole, the average asset fee or AUM fee that an employee would bear is around 1%. For smaller companies, that actually gets pretty high. For a 20, 25 person company, the average is about 2.2%, which is a lot. And it makes it hard to, for those employees to really justify saving in a 401k versus something else. And again, there's many other alternatives now that are make that much more affordable. And it's certainly in the employers and the employees' best interest if they find, a solution that is much more affordable on the asset side of things. And then in terms of the administrative cost that's borne by the employer, when you lump it all together, the annual fees, the compliance, everything that goes into administering the 401k, the average is around $275 per employee per year. And the nice thing is we're seeing, significant fee compression. I think a lot of that is due to some of these new fintech providers that are in the space that are really, using automation and efficiency to help drive down costs, and that in turn lowers the costs and for everybody involved.
And then fund selection. So offering a 401k is one thing, getting employees to actually use it is another. And you and I have spoken about what the funds you choose and how that can affect uptake of the plan. So how do you figure out what your employees want to invest in?
And for a larger organization, bigger corporations with, several hundred or thousands of employees, they'll oftentimes have a committee, and it's their job to kind of really understand what's going to be best for the organization as a whole. And so when they're setting up a 401k benefit, they really have to think of everybody. They have to think of, the high earners as well as the lower earners and those more entry-level positions as they're kind of structuring that fund lineup. So it's important to have a broad selection of choice. The other thing too is what we're finding, especially now with younger millennials and Gen Xers entering the workforce, they oftentimes are looking for alternative investments, so impact type investing. You've probably heard of ESG and SRI funds, and essentially these are ways of investing in companies that are concerned more about environmental, social governance, those types of things, so that we can still invest, we can still earn returns, but also try to do so with some goodwill associated with it. In general, again, the average we see is about 10 to 12 different fund options within a 401k. My belief is that's kind of limiting, and so we tend to believe in offering more choice. The downside with offering more choice is obviously it sometimes can be harder to choose from all the various options. And so most good providers, they'll have some form of a robo-advisor or a tool that'll help those employees, those participants, make a portfolio selection and put together something that's going to match their investment philosophy, their risk tolerance, their time horizon, and again, deliver the best outcomes we can.
Paint me a picture. What happens if you don't offer it? Does this hurt small businesses competitively going forward?
Yeah, so there's really two ways to look at it. Number one, there's a lot of legislation, and right now it's happening predominantly at the state level. So there's 14 states that have enacted legislation that's in various stages of adoption. So Oregon, is furthest along, and for them, I believe it's employers with more than 10 employees are required to offer something, or they have to join the state program, which has costs associated with the time and everything else going into it. And California is another one that's fairly far along in adoption. And so across the country, we're seeing a lot more states adopting these. And that's kind of that's the stick, and we believe much more in kind of the idea of offering carrot. And some of the ways that that's happening at the federal level, there's incentives now that a lot of employers aren't aware of. There's some significant tax incentives that are part of the Secure Act that allow them to defer a lot of those costs associated with the 401k and recoup them in tax credits. And then on top of that, there's actually some significant benefits to compensate employees through the 401k rather than just traditional compensation. And so anybody that hires on to a job, they're typically looking at not just the pay, but everything. We all know people who, my wife, she worked for the state of Utah for several years, and it's, the common theme is it's good work. The pay's not the best, but the benefits are amazing. So people really do look at benefits, and in general, my view, and having owned several small businesses, is really having a good culture and having good benefits and really just taking care of your employees leads to being able to attract talent, and oftentimes at rates that are more affordable than what a corporate counterpart might have to pay. Because I think in general, most employees want to, a lot of people like working for small businesses. There's more of a family atmosphere. And, as long as their basic needs are being taken care of, then they're willing to, sacrifice a little bit of pay to enjoy greater flexibility and a better environment overall. And so, a lot of times, if you're not offering just the bare minimum, and the two, number one is healthcare. And then the number two is 401k. And so if you're not offering those, then you're already at kind of a disadvantage. And you might have a pool table or a ping pong table and a lot of these awesome things at work in the break room or whatever. But if their basic needs aren't being met, it's going to be harder to attract talent, and you will end up paying more in the long run.
Well, there you have it. I want to thank you so much for taking out the time today. This was really great and very informative.
Thank you, Donna.